All right, everybody, welcome back. And we are going to talk now about kind of what makes a good password and password policy, both for you as an end user and for organizations. Now, for you as an end user, you want to pick a password, right? Everybody needs passwords. Everybody needs passwords for lots and lots and lots of different things. Um, so one of the things we need to make sure we have is a good password length, right? So there's a lot of websites and organizations and companies and etc. that only require a minimum length password, 6 characters, 8 characters, something like that. But again, it's possible to brute force 8 characters in a reasonable amount of time at this point. So you want to have, the longer the password, the better. I highly recommend at least 12 characters because the longer it is, the less likely people are going to be able to brute force it or guess it, right? And then importantly, make sure you use different passwords for different accounts. One of the easiest things that hackers can do is steal your password for one account, something that you didn't really think of as being important, some web forum somewhere where who cares, somebody broke my password. But then those same people use the same email address and the same password with their bank and their social media accounts and their credit card accounts and all those things. And hackers aren't stupid. They know people reuse passwords. So if they capture your username and password for one website or one service, they're going to try it all over the internet. They're going to try it on Facebook and Threads and banks all over the world and credit card companies all over the world. And there's going to be a disturbing number of times when the same user account or the same email address combined with the same password is going to work all over the place. So make sure you have different passwords for different systems. It doesn't have to be a lot different. You can, have, say, a core password that you then add on 3 or 4 characters at the end, which are different for each different website or service or whatever. But make sure they're different for different systems. Make sure you use a combination of uppercase, lowercase, letters, numbers, symbols, etc., etc. Because again, that helps with things like dictionary attacks and brute force attacks. Unfortunately, when organizations force you to use these things, hackers know about those rules, and thus they can narrow down their attacks to only encompass choices with those rules. So the best security is when organizations don't force you to use at least one uppercase and at least one lowercase and at least one symbol, etc. But users choose to do that anyways, right? Make sure that your password is not a dictionary word or based on a dictionary word in any language, right? And again, I don't just mean the Oxford English Dictionary. I mean any hacking dictionary, any word or phrase that you think might appear in some hacker's password cracking dictionary. So Boston Red Sox meets our requirements for 12 letters, and it doesn't appear in an actual English dictionary, but it will appear in a password cracking dictionary. Thus, you don't want to use it. And don't kind of use this as the base either, right? So Boston Red Sox with the O in socks being a 0 instead of an O, that's not going to work either. Because there are automated systems that will take every word or phrase in a password cracking dictionary and do things like, if there's an O in it, substitute the letter 0 and try that. So it can't be a word or phrase that's common. It can't be significantly based on a word or phrase that's common. It has to be, for all intents and purposes, kind of a random series of numbers and letters. Okay? Now, there are some organizations that assign passwords, i.e., when you sign up, you are given a password by the organization itself or the website or whatever. This is a really bad idea for a few reasons. Number one, it takes time, right? Time is money for business, and somebody having to deal with passwords and creating passwords for new users and then sending it to them, making sure they have it, making sure the message stays secure, all that stuff. And each individual interaction takes only a tiny amount of time, but over a large organization, that's going to take up a huge amount of time for the organization, and that costs money. Second, usually these are hard to remember, right? We don't want our users to forget their password, because then they're going to write it down, which is bad, or they're going to talk to your password person and waste more of their time having to reset the password and get a new one. And then finally, if you have somebody else generating a password for your users, that by definition means there's at least 2 people who know what that password is. And that's always bad. Passwords should only ever be known by one person. And then one thing that lots of organizations do that I absolutely hate is rotating passwords. Forcing users to change passwords every 60 days or 90 days or 120 days or whatever. This is terrible for security for 2 reasons. Number one, it forces people to choose easier to remember passwords frequently. So if I just have one 12-digit, close enough to random series of numbers and letters passwords, I can spend some time and energy memorizing that. But if I'm going to have to change it 30 days or 60 days later, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose something much easier to remember so I don't have to spend that time and energy memorizing it every 60 days or 90 days. So it makes people choose easy to remember passwords, and or it encourages users to write down their passwords. And that's always terrible for security. We want people to remember their passwords, not have some either electronic or physical place that they've written it down. So if I were in charge of an organization, instead of having rotating passwords, what I would do is find a good password cracking dictionary and lists of passwords that have been leaked online. There are websites that collect all of the known data breaches for password hashes. I would just use that database of known terrible passwords, either from a password cracking dictionary or from previously acquired hashes by hackers, and put that in a database on my organization's server somewhere, and make sure that nobody can use any of those passwords. So anytime a new user creates a password, it hashes that password, it compares it against this list of do not use, and if it appears on there, say, I'm sorry, that password is not good enough, try again. And wait until every user creates a password that does not appear in a hacking dictionary and does not appear on lists of previously compromised passwords. That would be the smart way to do it as an organization, and would be much more secure than a dumb rotating password structure. Now, this is a webcomic from the absolutely wonderful XKCD, which you should definitely be a fan of. And this is demonstrating how modern password practice is kind of not efficient, right? It makes people use passwords that are easy for computers to crack, but difficult for people to remember. So the kind of intention here, the message here, is if that we take, say, instead of using one dictionary word or a common phrase like Boston Red Sox, let's take 4 English words that are completely unrelated and shove those together to create a password. And in this example, it's correct, horse, battery, staple. Those 4 English words, they're all English words, yes, but they have nothing to do with each other. And thus, if we shove all 4 of them together into one long password, it would essentially be impossible to brute force. It wouldn't appear in any dictionary. Each individual word would appear in a dictionary, but the 4 shoved together wouldn't appear in a dictionary. And it's much, much, much more easy for humans to remember this kind of password. So that's XKCD's kind of advice on how to create a password. But if I am going to run a website or an organization that requires passwords, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to have some kind of password guidelines. So as I said before, if I was running an organization, I would have password cracking dictionary hashes that every new password had to be compared against. But some kind of guidelines, minimum length requirements are good. There are different rules that you can have to kind of force your users to create secure passwords. Make sure you have those. Don't allow people to have 5-character passwords. Don't allow people to have passwords that are, based on a dictionary word, etc. Make sure you have a lockout after some number of failed attempts. So if somebody tries to log into a user account and they put in the correct username and then the wrong password, say 5 times or 10 times, have some kind of lockout in place so that now, even if they do input the correct password, it won't let them in. They have to either wait half an hour or they have to contact IT before trying again or something. Because if you don't have this lockout process, then people can kind of brute force a password from remotely. All I have to do is set up my computer to try, a given username and then try every word in my password cracking dictionary in the password field. And, it might take me 10,000 or 100,000 tries to find the correct password, but if there's no lockout after a certain number of wrong attempts, who cares? I'll let my computer run and try all 10,000 or 100,000 or whatever different possible passwords. Make sure you use encryption for everything, not just the files on your servers, not just hashing passwords, but every single piece of network communications, both external and internal, should have good encryption, not just cheapo, easy, old school encryption, but the latest and greatest, really nice, fancy encryption programs. Don't rely on application passwords, right? So, lots of different applications from operating systems to, different programs that you might use as part of your business or organization. They're going to have their own kind of password features integrated into that software. And those are good. You should enable those, but don't rely solely on those. Have extra security, have extra something on top of those. And then use anti-sniffer software. So if somebody's listening to your network communications, you want to know. And there's software out there that will detect third parties trying to listen in on your network communications. You need to know if that's happening, so have that kind of software running. But the most important thing, the number one most important password policy for any organization or website or company is education. Education, education, education. Make sure that every employee, every member of the organization, every user understands how passwords get cracked, how passwords get broken, how social engineering works, right? They need to know as much as possible about their passwords in order to protect themselves and make sure that nobody is stealing that password or cracking that password or using their account to access something they shouldn't. So education, education, education. Always, always, always important. All right, we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to be back for what I assure you will be the final subsection of this conversations on passwords and security.